I'm Carol McNamara, and I'm the director of the Great Hearts Institute for Classical Education. And I'm here this afternoon with Mark Bauerlein to talk about Symposium and what we're doing here and why it's important and why everybody should come. Mark, thank you for coming again this year. I was just listening to the panel that you were on this afternoon, and the panel was about the canon, the Western canon, and whether it's important to have a canon, and if it is, and if it is, what should be on the canon and what should be excluded from the canon, and whether we should have what we called, the title was, would there be a benefit to having a quote-unquote looser canon? And I was hoping we could start by you just talking about that discussion and what your thoughts were on it.
I'm very glad to be here. I've been to Great Hearts before, and I like supporting everything you do because you're the model, the charter classical schools. Your waiting list demonstrates your success. Parents want you. This isn't top down, this is bottom up. And one of the reasons I think that you appeal to so many people, far more than you can actually serve, is because you believe in a tradition. You believe that there is a core, okay? There are fringes where things are, dynamic, but there is a solid core of works, of ideas, of events, of heroes, heroines, villains, who make up a heritage that all American 17 and 18-year-olds should leave high school having internalized to some degree. And I think a core like what Great Hearts have isn't just a matter of a political matter of the West or of America. I actually think that it's important to the psychological health of 17-year-olds. The world can be very chaotic and confusing because it is. And they're leaving home soon. They live in a hyper-accelerated social media universe. There isn't a lot of stability and unity in their lives, which only speaks to the eventual rates of depression and anxiety and social mistrust. It's their rootlessness. It's the lack of foundations. It's the feeling that they do not have a past that is somehow shoring them up. They don't feel like they live in the average American 17-year-old, they don't live in the shadow of greatness, of monumental achievements, of momentous events in history. Great Hearts gives them that. You give them a background that does have coherence. It is meaningful. They want to rebel. They want to renounce. Fine. You're giving them something meaningful against which to rebel. It actually helps them to define themselves, even if it's in an adversarial relationship. That's what your curriculum does. And I think that too often the psychological condition of the rising adolescent isn't taken into account in the curriculum decisions that we see in the public schools, which so often is just about skills. It's about developing college readiness or workforce readiness without any depth of art, of literature, of the deep historical past and what that means. It leaves them, again, rootless, foundationless. Churches used to be much more influential providing this in the past. Most kids don't go to church. They don't have regular church attendance. And you often had much more stable neighborhoods as well. in the United States that would give structure and coherence to the worlds these kids grow into. That doesn't happen as much, which puts even more pressure on the schools to provide it, where kids spend half their lives these days when they're teenagers. So this is, I think, the one of the most important values of the Great Hearts education.
And is that what you would say to a parent? We're constantly persuading parents to bring their children to Great Hearts. I mean, you're right, we have a waiting list, but we are also engaged in expansion and talking to parents about why a classical education is the place that they should send their children to make them serious human beings, to make them thoughtful people, not just for today, not just for while they're in school, but for forming their futures. I mean, how would you explain that to?
I actually think the psychological health argument goes a long way with parents right now, because we see so many kids having trouble. I mean, college offices, if you go to colleges and you go to the psychological counseling services, there's a long line of kids who need support. Look at the number of kids on medication these days. It's out of control, out of sight. And I think this is a place where if you tell parents, youth culture is crazy. TikTok is filled with idiocy, stupidity, and vulgarity.
Right.
It's everywhere. They know the influence of that. When they see that you are handing to their children the meaningful things that have stood the test of time, you are giving them knowledge of the ages, you're doing ancient languages, you are committed to great works, to produce great hearts. I think that argument the psychological health argument may even be stronger than intellectual rigor argument these days. And I think you can make that argument with confidence.
One of the things that I've heard you speak about frequently is the importance of including memorization. This morning we had Eleanor Patient recite Mending Wall for us, and you were talking about how formative that experience was.
Yeah.
And I know that you've been involved in curriculum development in different states and standards development. So why do you insist that they include memorization among those standards?
Well, we know that memorization has been downgraded by educators, progressivist educators, for decades. Rote memorization is so mechanical, and they largely won that argument for a long time.
Yeah.
But you mentioned in Florida, in Georgia, Arkansas, Oklahoma, where I've worked on ELA standards, we got memorization and recitation into the standards. And one of the arguments that I made to the educators who might have been a little resistant was, parents are going to love you for this. A parent who at the dinner table hears a child recite a Robert Frost poem, oh, that's my girl, that's my boy, at the end of The Music Man, when the kids are playing, and the parents get up and they cheer. But the idea that memorization is a low mental activity is absolutely false.
Right.
We know that from neuroscience, mapping. When you watch a kid memorizing a poem and practicing it, the brain lights up, big time. It's not some little thing. We're talking about memorizing, not like a list of numbers, memorizing an Emily Dickinson poem, let's say. Now, what has to happen? Well, one, you need memory, right? Memorization. And memory is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And memorization is one of the fundamental traits of college success. If you're going to medical school and you're pre-med, you got to memorize a lot of stuff,
Right.
as you know. So it's just the exercise of memorization itself is mental, it's brain work, mental toughness.
Yeah.
Another thing, you're building vocabulary, okay? The vocabulary of youth culture gets more moronic every month, right? Here they're going to be using words that they would not otherwise encounter, and they'll have to understand them and use them. So the vocabulary development in memorization. 3, recitation, public speaking, right? They're all afraid to stand up and talk, right? This is practice in forensic, right? In public delivery, and it's a very, the more they do it, the easier it gets. So this should be a repeated activity in English class, or if you have a speech class, every few weeks they should do this. 4, the personality effect, where I'm an actor. I've got to become William Shakespeare.
Right.
And I've got to look over, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date, blah, blah, blah. You have to become Shakespeare. You have to become Ezra Pound, Wordsworth. And it's a very good exercise for the naturally egotistical, narcissistic, self-involved 17-year-old. Get out of your own stupid head, okay? Yeah. This is a healthy thing to do. So that those 4 things are concrete benefits of bringing memorization into the classroom, and you guys know this. Right, we know this. Why don't, at the National Endowment for the Arts, when I was there, we did a report called Reading at Risk 20 years ago that showed kids aren't reading literature anymore, novels, poems, plays. One of the things that Chairman Dana Gioia did was create something called Poetry Out Loud. It was we created a national recitation contest on the model of the National Spelling Bee. And we gave a list of poems, classic poems only. We gave the list of poems, and kids would come and perform the poem, and there were judges. We ended up with the national competition. The finalists went to D.C. We had the finalists at the Folger Shakespeare Library. And I'm telling you, Carol, the audience was as intense and rowdy as a basketball game. The competition, they were yelling, and total silence while the performance was, and then, yeah, the best ever. So the kids loved the competition. We had district level, state level, and then national level. So this actually became, it's still going, more than 300,000 kids participate in this every year. If Great Hearts wants to know more about it, let me know. I'll connect you. But
absolutely.
It's something, it's very hard for students to do. They're not accustomed to this. When you get a student in front of the room struggling, you wait, give a little cue. Okay, I keep going. When they finish and sit down, there's a look of accomplishment on their faces because they know they've really done something.
Well, you saw the annual Bard winner perform this morning, and so Great Hearts actually has its own internal competition.
Oh, really?
She won a competition.
Fantastic.
That's how she became
That's great.
the Great Hearts Bard for the year.
That's great.
That's great. I want to conclude by asking you about something you were talking about on this panel about the canon, which is you mentioned Matthew Arnold's discussion of having touchstones.
Yes.
And so I'd like you to elaborate what that concept is, but it seems to me from what you were mentioning that it might have something to do, or it might work well with our theme. Our theme is cultivating wonder. And so is it possible that if you have these touchstones in your education, that they give you something to hold on to and to wonder about and to take you forward into your education and on the pursuit of knowledge?
A lot of the touchstones are moments of the sublime. And what is the sublime? It's the moment of awe and wonder. You
Yeah.
sort of you're stopped. You're sort of overtaken, and all you did do is you take in the object which seems bigger, more powerful than your senses can absorb. And this can happen in literature, in drama, in film, in painting. You know, you walk into the Villa Borghese in Rome, and you have the famous Bernini statues from room to room. And you walk in and you see Bernini's Apollo and Daphne. You can't talk. You're just, it's this Bernini effect. I'm stunned. I'm overwhelmed by the power and beauty of this creation. That would be a touchstone. And wonder is that moment you stop, right? You're not pushing, you wonder at something, you're not trying to reach a conclusion, you're just sort of letting the object sort of circulate in your head, and you're open, right? You're open to what might happen here. You're not trying to make the object be something or do something else. That's the aesthetic posture right there. And the more we cultivate that, the more we develop the humanity inside these teenagers, which they don't possess naturally. It must be formed. You know, the French term for education is formation, right?
Yeah.
Formation. Or education is educare, right? To draw out of. You know, you're in an inferior condition. We got to pull you into a better condition here.
Yeah.
So I think that the touchstones contain that capacity to induce wonder, to produce the sublime moment, and the more we can give that to kids, the better. And a lot of this, I mean, the memorization, you know, if you take the short Wordsworth poem, she dwelt among the untrodden ways beside the springs of Dove. Dove is a little river in the Lake District. She dwelt among the untrodden ways beside the springs of Dove, a maid whom there was none to praise and very few to love. A violet by a mossy stone, half hidden from the eye, fair as a star, when only one is shining in the sky. She lived unknown, and few could know when Lucy ceased to be. But she is in her grave, and oh, the difference to me. That's a sublime moment at the end of that poem. That's what Wordsworth was able to do with these tiny little lyrics, ballads, that he could induce. If kids carry these moments of awe and wonder based upon these touchstones in their heads, they will lead richer lives. Not necessarily saying they'll be better people. There are some really bad people who are highly educated in humanistic material.
Yeah.
The second place Adolf Hitler went in Paris after visiting Napoleon's tomb, which makes sense, was Garnier's Opera House. This art object, the greatest monument to music in all of Europe at that time. It's part of the tragic condition of humanity that becoming more educated, becoming a person of more refined taste, doesn't always guarantee moral improvement.
Yeah.
But doesn't matter. We pursue that with the kids.
Well, it certainly can help too if it's done properly, and if it's engaged in, if it's it seems to me if it's understood as formation as opposed to just reading.
Right. Right.
That there is an approach to creating great arts that is different than just providing, books.
Right.
So.
Well, when one wants them to learn the lessons of Dostoevsky, taught by by those things that will inculcate virtue. One thinks that if they read a little Nietzsche, that it will sharpen actually their understanding of vice as well. If we've got a good virtuous foundation, they're able to read early Lord Byron, the libertine world, and recognize it for what it is. We want to improve discernment, and our faith is that they'll respond to the good. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having a conversation with me today and for joining us at Symposium.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.